So what if the very system we live in its constant drive to control everything, has accidentally created the tools for its own downfall? It's a pretty wild idea, right? Well, that's the provocative argument at the heart of the text Capitalism's Suicide, Tools for Freedom, and we're going to dive right into it.
The author kicks things off with this just chilling metaphor. This is how one citizen described what it felt like to deal with a huge, totally opaque digital welfare system. And it just perfectly captures that feeling of powerlessness, you know? The feeling of being judged by a machine you can't see, for reasons you can't understand, with stakes that feel like life and death.
And you have to ask, right? When we feel like a system is out to get us, is the problem actually with the system, or is it maybe all in our heads?
Well, the book's answer is pretty blunt. That anxiety, it isn't paranoia. It's a perfectly rational response to a deeply dysfunctional reality. But here's the real twist in the argument. The very system causing all this anxiety has, totally by accident, built the technology that could set us free. To get how that's possible, we first have to really understand the diagnosis.
So, the first big idea here is that our society's major problems, climate change, incredible waste, you name it, they aren't just unfortunate accidents. The author argues they are the predictable result of how this system is designed. They call it System A, and these crises, well, they're features, not bugs.
And at the core of this whole diagnosis is this fundamental clash. On one side, you've got use value, the actual real-world usefulness of something. Food is for eating, a house is for living in. Simple. But our system, it's obsessed with the other side, exchange value. What's it worth? How much profit can you squeeze out of it? The argument is that when profit is the only thing that matters, the system starts doing things that are, frankly, completely irrational from a real-world perspective.
And I mean, just look at these examples. They really drive the point home. The source talks about tons of perfectly good food being destroyed just to keep market prices high. You have massive data centers pumping out enormous amounts of clean heat right into the atmosphere because, well, it's more profitable to just burn biomass instead. In every case, real, tangible wealth, actual useful stuff, gets sacrificed to protect an abstract number on a spreadsheet.
Now, this logic doesn't just apply to objects, it gets applied to people too. The author has a name for it: punitive cybernetics. Punitive as in for punishment, and cybernetics, which is all about systems of control. It's a way of governing that's built on a single core assumption, that you, the citizen, are probably a cheat, and technology's main job is to catch you in the act.
90%. Just let that number sink in for a minute. What on earth could that represent?
Well, that is the false positive rate for a Danish algorithm called Model Udlan, which was designed to sniff out welfare fraud. You heard that right. According to the data cited in the book, for every 10 people the algorithm flagged as suspicious, 9 of them were completely innocent.
So if the system is flat out wrong 90% of the time, is it just a really bad algorithm? The author argues, no. A system with that kind of error rate isn't trying to be accurate. It's designed to cast the widest possible net of suspicion, to create this constant low-level hum of fear and discipline. The inaccuracy, in a twisted way, becomes a feature, not a bug.
So what happens when you keep pointing out these absurd flaws? The text argues the system has this ultimate defense mechanism. It pathologizes you. Your legitimate, fact-based criticisms of a broken system get twisted and reframed as a symptom of your personal problem, your paranoia. Your rational mistrust is used as proof that you're the one who's unwell.
Okay, but after all that pretty grim diagnosis, here's where the whole argument flips on its head. This is the central claim. In building this massive machine for control and profit, the system has accidentally created its own gravediggers. The very tools designed to monitor us, the author argues, can be repurposed for coordination and freedom. So, what are these tools? The author points to 3 big ones. First, the Internet of Things. All those smart devices and sensors everywhere. They can act like a real-time nervous system for the entire economy, telling us exactly what's needed, where, and when. Second, decentralized AI can be the brain, crunching all that data to figure out the best way to meet actual human needs, not just to make a buck. And finally, you have things like blockchain, distributed ledger tech, which can act as a trust layer, a secure, shared public record that replaces all that top-down suspicion with verifiable proof.
And this isn't just some sci-fi fantasy. The book points to a real-life historical example, Project Cybersyn in Chile, back in the early 70s. It used this network of telex machines, kind of like old-school internet, to coordinate the entire national economy in real time. And get this, it was so good at routing around a major strike in '72 that, according to the author,
Its violent destruction after the coup a year later was basically an ideological necessity. It showed that a different way of organizing things was actually possible.
So, with these modern tools in hand, what would a new system actually look like? Well, the final section of the text sketches out a vision. It's not about chaos, it's about what it calls designed freedom, a system that builds liberty and justice right into its very architecture.
And the blueprint for this is something called the Viable System Model, or VSM. The core idea is brilliant, really. It says we should stop trying to organize society like a rigid, top-down pyramid and start organizing it more like a biological nervous system. It's all about finding that sweet spot between maximum freedom for local groups and just enough central coordination to keep everything working together.
So here's the quick and dirty of how it works. At the bottom level, the muscles, think factories, hospitals, local communities, they have as much autonomy as possible to run themselves. The central authority acts more like a brainstem. It's cybernetically lazy, meaning it stays out of the way unless the stability of the whole system is at risk. And this is the most important part. The overall goals, the forebrain stuff, are set democratically by everybody.
Of course, I know what you're thinking. A huge, coordinated system? It sounds an awful lot like Big Brother, right? The author tackles this head-on, proposing safeguards that are baked into the architecture itself. Worried about dictatorship? That's what the decentralized VSM design is for. Worried about people being forced to work just to survive? You guarantee free access to basic goods. And what about surveillance? That's where you use clever tech like zero-knowledge proofs, which can verify something is true, like, are you eligible for this, without ever needing to see your private data.
And here's the real kicker. In this proposed System B, values we care about like freedom and justice aren't just flimsy political promises that depend on who's in charge. They become the engineered, inevitable result of how the system is built from the ground up.
And all of this leads to the author's ultimate conclusion. We've diagnosed a system that's designed for failure. We've identified the technologies we need to build its replacement. The problem, therefore, isn't a technical one anymore. The real hurdle is purely political.
The call to action is a modern spin on a very old idea, to take democratic ownership of the algorithms, the data centers, the sensor networks, to basically use the very tools that are currently used to control us and instead use them to coordinate a more rational, more humane world.
The technology for this new world, the author claims, is already here. It's been built. It exists. And so the text leaves us all with one final, very provocative question. Do we have the courage to take back what is already ours?